Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Benjamin Quinn, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, I'm so excited to welcome you to tonight's event with Adrienne Raphel, celebrating the paperback release of her latest book, Thinking Inside the Box, Adventures with Crosswords and the Puzzling People Who Can't Live Without Them, in conversation with Evan James. Tonight's event is part of our ongoing virtual event series. As we remain digital for the time being, we're so excited to continue the work of bringing authors and their writing to our community during these difficult times. Especially now, it is through the support of authors and our beloved readers that we are able to make events like this happen. So thank you so much for continuing to show up week after week. For tonight's event, we will conclude with some time for your questions. If you'd like to ask the speaker something, locate the Q&A function wherever it may live on your Zoom display, where you can submit all your questions. We'll get through as many as time allows. If you go to the chat section of this presentation, I will shortly be posting a link to our website where you can purchase your copy of Thinking Out Inside the Box. If you already have a copy of the book or would like to contribute to this series and our store in a different way, I will also be posting in the chat a link to our website's donation function. We greatly appreciate any and all support you are able to extend to us at this time. And lastly, as you may know if you participated in large virtual gatherings this last year, technical issues might come up. If any technical glitches do occur, we will do our best to resolve them as quickly as possible. Thank you for your patience and understanding. And now it is my pleasure to introduce tonight's speakers. Adrienne Raphel's debut poetry collection, What Was It For?, was the winner of the Rescue Press Black Box Poetry Prize. She earned her PhD in English literature just across the street from Harvard University and her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her poetry, essays, and criticism have been featured widely in venues including The New Yorker, Poetry, The New Republic, Poets and Writers, and many other publications. This evening, she is joined in conversation by Evan James, an award-winning writer whose personal essays and fiction have appeared in such publications as Oxford American, Travel and Leisure, and the New York Times, among others. He is the author of the novel Cheer Up, Mr. Widdicombe, and the essay collection I've Been Wrong Before, for his, quote, shrewd and hilariously funny writing, to quote the always brilliant Carmen Maria Machado. He is the recipient of awards and fellowships from Yaddo, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, the Carson McCullers Center, and many other places. Tonight, they'll be discussing Adrienne's latest book, Thinking Inside the Box, a brilliant and enchanting venture into the realm and history of crossword puzzles that Mary Norris calls a gold mine of revelations. If there is a pantheon of cruciverbalist scholars, Adrienne Raphel has established herself squarely within it. Blending first-person reporting from the world of crosswords with an entertaining telling of its rich literary history, there's a lot to be gleaned from a book like this. For one, many of us get to encounter the word cruciverbalist for the first time. We get to discover how a game first designed to fill extra space in the weekly paper has become indispensable to the lives of many. And we get to meet a cast of people whose daily delight in participating speaks not only to the value of ritual, but to the excitement of language. At a time when our language can feel so stuck and monotonous, thinking inside the box is an essential reminder that words can be fun, acrobatic, and even comforting. We are so happy to be hosting this event tonight. Without further ado, I'm delighted to turn things over to our speakers. The digital podium is all yours, Adrienne and Evan.
Hello, thank you.
Hey, hi.
Hi,
Thank
Adrian.
Hey, Evan, it's great to see you.
You too. We were gonna do this. I don't know if people are aware, but you and I were going to have an event when the hardcover came out, which was just the moment of total pandemic book event collapse. So this is long overdue, and I'm so excited.
No, I have been. I wanted to talk with you so much when the hardcover came out, and also about your book of essays, which came out right then too, and it was all gonna be beautiful and serendipitous and magical, and angels and fairies.
What a year it's been, and now it's been all of those things in a different way.
Angels and Zoom fairies, exactly. But yet, I'm so glad we find ourselves here, though.
Me too. I'm really looking forward to talking about your book, and which was such a joy to read and to revisit in preparation for this. And yeah, I've many things to ask you, but I know to start with that you have a petite section in mind that you would like to read from.
Yeah, I thought that just in the spirit of getting to know a bit about the book, which I have in its cheery yellow paperback version here. So there's lots of elements to the book, but I thought it might be fun to just read a little bit about me and
Please.
about my family too. So I was going to read just a couple of pages of a section from that talks about going to a crossword tournament, which is usually held at the end of March. For obvious reasons that didn't happen last year. This year they've rescheduled virtually for the end of April. Hopefully, it'll all be in person again, but yeah, exactly. But so we'll think a little bit about family and crosswords, and then we can take it all from there.
That's great.
So I'm average at crosswords. I'm a hunt and peck solver. I comb the puzzle, find the answers I know, plop them in, and start sifting again. I admire cryptic crosswords from afar, like bonsai. But games run in my blood. Both of my sets of grandparents are from Atlantic City, New Jersey, a town that has always made its legal and less than legal living through games. Back in the radio days, my great-grandmother Sarah was once on a quiz show. The host asked her, "Is Mickey Mouse a dog or a cat?" "Cat," she snapped. My mom's great-great-uncle Benny, according to family lore, took the rap for Nookie Johnson, the mobster who ruled Atlantic City in the 20s. On the other side of the family, as tiny girls, my grandmother and great aunt used to run the numbers from their father's boarding house lobby to the bookie's back room in the corner candy store. They were the perfect criminals, since they had no idea they were doing anything wrong. By the time I knew them, my grandparents' gamesmanship had mellowed. My mom's parents timed breakfast to The Price is Right. My dad's parents timed lunch to the Newlywed Game, and they often met for dinner and Jeopardy. My family finds it difficult to enter willingly into competitions when we don't know if we'll be above average, but we're great at taking risks when we know we'll come out on top. We compete amongst each other to see which one of us is the most competitive. Like a slightly less fraught version of J.D. Salinger's Glass Family, in which all the children receive scholarship money from the quiz show It's a Wise Child. My brother and I grew up in a game world. Dad turned daily life into a series of contests. The game of what to have for breakfast, the game of going to the drugstore to pick up the newspaper and cutting the line to put down the exact amount of money. Things my dad likes: racket sports, bridge, solving math problems in his head. Things he hates: yoga, meditation, ice fishing. My mother is the best at crosswords and my father the most puzzle oriented, but my brother, Ben, is the family's true games person. Ben, a data analyst by day, is a trivia host by night, working various pubs through a franchise called Geeks Who Drink. Ben memorized sports almanacs as a kid and could spit out facts about Super Bowl winners and baseball players' RBIs like a jukebox. When he was 7 years old, Ben burst into tears on the Little League field when his team lost. My mother tried to console him by telling him that if he was so upset, he didn't have to compete. Ben turned his wet face to her and said, "But Mommy, I love competition." So a few weeks before the ACPT, which is the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament, I told my parents I was going to Connecticut for this tournament. I meant this as information. They saw it as an invitation. "Ooh, is that the one in the movie?" my mother said. I've always wanted to go to that. Maybe we'll come too. Can we go to a bridge tournament instead? Asked my father. You should write a book about bridge. Neither one of you has to come, I said. You two go, Dad said. I'd be in last place anyway. They both came. My father and mother worked together, running a consulting and publishing firm that my father inherited from his parents. 2 decades ago, they moved our family from southern New Jersey to northern Vermont, installing their office on the top floor of our house. They share a cell phone. True story. Ben called me a few hours after I'd spoken to the parents. Will Mom and Dad be mad if I don't come to your thing? Ben fretted. I think they're expecting me to go, but I have geek brunch that Sunday and I just don't know. I don't know why they're going, I said. Why would they assume you're going? There's no reason anyone else has to come. Because it's games, said Ben. On the train, I casually glanced at the fellow passengers, sizing them up to see if any of them were my competition. The crossword is a commuter's sport. Solvers can clock themselves by how many stops it takes to complete the grid. But the Amtrak from Boston to Stamford didn't prove to be a useful clock, since there was too much time between stations to measure prowess by cities. I wasn't really going to the tournament to compete. I was going to interview, observe, soak in the atmosphere, become inaugurated into the crossword cult. But as I swan down the Northeast corridor, I couldn't help but get that spark that contests always give me. Somehow, improbably, with no Rocky-esque montage of training, I saw a vision of my Cinderella crossword story, that through some incredible osmosis or sheer luck, I'd magically be imbued with a prodigious talent and whiz past the others, or all my competitors would find themselves simultaneously struck with lethargy, Lotus Eaters style, and would loll about as I soared ahead. I knew that I had less than 0% chance of making it into the finals, that I was there to learn, not compete. But deep down, a tiny kernel of magical thinking whispered to me that maybe I would win it all. And I don't. I think I'll stop there.
What a wonderful excerpt. Thank you, Adrian. Such a revealing and entertaining window into a puzzle-oriented, game-oriented, competition-driven family culture that kind of lies behind some of your obsession with crosswords and other puzzles. What did and this is something, by the way, that sort of weaves in and out of the book, along with cultural history of the crossword puzzle itself and investigation into the contemporary situation of the crossword in our culture. How did your family respond when they found out you were writing a book about crossword puzzle?
Oh, that's such a good question. And it was, my family, I should say, is wonderful and very supportive. And they're great. A couple of them I think are here tonight. So hi. Hi, family. They were very excited. What's been most telling is, I shared sort of an early draft of these sections, or most, I think, all the book with them. And my dad likes to say things like, well, I come across as the dumb one. I come across as that. Like, no, Dad, you're not. No, you come across as the one who's good at bridge, Dad. No, but I think that in many ways, it's really been. It was such a fun book to research because I realized I'd been doing the research my whole life for this book. My family just has enjoyed playing games of all stripes. It's the way that we communicate best with each other, I think. And so I think that in a serious way, a big part of my drive to think a lot about games and my sort of excitement about them, I mean, it comes in a lot of realms, but one of them was really because it's just woven into my DNA and the fabric of how I communicate with my family. And I think that, you know, just like this is true for so many people, that games are a method of communication and communication in so many ways. And speaking of communication, I believe you froze for a moment, Evan. So I'll just hang on for a second. Yeah.
And we're back.
Yay, okay.
Sorry, I missed the last bit of what you said, but like a puzzle-oriented brain, I can infer and deduce.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, since we're celebrating the paperback release of the book, and it's been about a year since it was first published, and I know from working on books that even before that, there's, you know, at least a year of really digging into the minutia of pre-publication, and you were writing it for some time before that. So I'm curious what you have been. I know books and projects that we work on for this long often continue living in our brains after they've come out and after we've shared them with the world. So what kind of things have you been thinking about in the last year, or what new feedback or ideas have come up around this book for you?
Yeah, so in the past year especially, you know, who could have predicted that I would come out with a book called Thinking Inside the Box on the week that our world became Zoom boxes, you know? It was, I felt some sort of crazy, eerie prophecy happening. It's like, I promise it's not me. But, you know, I realized crosswords mean so much to people at all times. They really take on a particular valence in times of global crisis. So I sort of, actually something that came up for me in the past year of thinking about the book is history in many ways, because in 1941 was when the New York Times started its crossword, and it started its crossword because of World War II. It started when the Times had sort of poo-pooed and said, our smart readers don't need such a, you know, inane toy, basically. Like we can get readers without luring them in with the crossword. And then their whole thinking flipped when they realized, wait, the crossword isn't just sort of like the toy in a Happy Meal. It's actually a really great place for people to come in the newspaper. It's still within the newspaper. It's still thinking about the world. It's still really engaged, but it's also an escape. It's a place where you can do something that is like, you know, you don't have to read terrible headlines. You can have fun, and fun is, and you know, the frustrating kind of fun and that kind of like joy and success and all the like emotions of the crossword are really like, they're very serious and necessary things, and really ways for their coping mechanisms in the best way. Their strategies to keep on living when everything else is uncertain. The crossword is a really certain place. So that became, I heard from countless people at the beginning and through quarantine, of like, still now, a friend of mine just told me last weekend, she's like, you wouldn't believe how great my husband and I have gotten at the Sunday Times crossword. Like we're there. So I mean, so the crossword itself is just becoming an important site during this moments of uncertainty. It's a certain place, but it's not a turn your brain off place. It's a allow yourself to sort of remember that you're human in this, like, but like in a ritual way. And then, yeah, another, one more thing that I've really about the crossword itself in the past year is just the enormous diversity of constructors and editors and solvers and things that go into the puzzle. So like that had been happening towards the end of, especially towards the end of when I've been researching the book, and it really just sort of quantum leap. I'm trying to draw the kind of graph that's like, my math stops at like exponential graphs, you know, but like the explosion of excitement and diversity around what goes into a puzzle, who's constructing our puzzles, and what are we thinking, what can the crossword hold. It's taken other quantum leaps in its past. It's in the middle of one now, and that is just so thrilling to realize that this technology continues to be just as relevant, if not more so today than it was at its origins.
Yeah, that sounds like a really exciting development in the contemporary crossword, especially now. I mean, one of the exciting things for me as a reader was discovering how various and lively and mutating the history of the crossword was. There were a lot of revelations in there for me in that regard, and like you're saying, that they, first of all, often they emerged in an important way during World War I and World War II, and that there was this sense for some time that they were a sort of morally suspect diversion, a way that people were squandering their mental energy. This is really an interesting cultural history through line for me in the book, is this kind of refrain for some decades, once the crossword begins to sweep newspapers, that it is this kind of a waste of productive energy, a misuse of the mind, essentially, which runs pretty counter to some of our received ideas about brain puzzles now. But it's interesting. It's interesting that even now there's another chapter in that, the development of that history taking place.
Yeah, I found this so fascinating of the crossword as this the latest scapegoat for how we are rotting our brains, like that was like these librarians saying, no, don't do the crossword, nobody's reading these, novels anymore. But then the novels, of course, were the things that were rotting the brains before. So it's like so now I think crosswords are really, I like to think they're a much more noble thing you can be doing on your phone, other than like there's always people are always going to judge, and like they want something to be the thing rotting the brain. But it's fascinating to me that that's how the crosswords evolution, the perceived notion from this this frivolous thing into, can crosswords prevent Alzheimer's disease? Can crosswords, really like, and also their symbolic perception from frivolous toy to, if you're good at crosswords, that's going to be a marker that you are a super smart, super nerdy person. Again, I think we are dealing with some more Zoom issues. Hopefully Evan will come back to us in a moment. I'm just going to give him another moment to unfreeze. But
Adrian, I think maybe I know you had another passage you might be interested in reading. I don't know if you want to cut in with. Actually, here we go. Okay, I'll jump off now.
So sorry for my spotty internet.
Oh, not a problem.
You may have answered this just now as I was vanishing and reappearing, but I know you chart this in the book, but I guess another interesting point in that kind of cultural history and continuum is pinpointing. This is sort of a two-headed question, but like pinpointing the moment that crosswords become a culturally legitimate thing, because in a lot of the language being used before, you know, scaremongers are saying, as they often say about many new inventions, that it's a threat to legitimate readers, and that word really struck me as this kind of like crosswords being a part of this ongoing battle for cultural legitimacy. And then another strand of the book that I find so fascinating is the way you identify and connect crosswords and puzzles to many different literary figures, and situate it kind of in the cultural history of our literature. So maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, and I think that, well, one thing that helps to solidify the crosswords legitimacy, and it is a funny word and it's a word that comes up, is the really making the crossword a canonical form. And hopefully everyone will come join us, but I'm just going to continue answering his fantastic questions. So because I had talked about the way that crosswords, you know, I think that, I don't know, Evan, you cut out for a moment, but I was just saying the form of the crossword and solidifying the form really like makes it feel legitimate, right? So Margaret Farrer is the first crossword editor at the New York Times, and she's also, I think she is, if not single-handedly, very much a part of, or a very strong leader in turning the crossword from this word cross puzzle that arose out of desperation when Arthur Wynne invented it to fill some space in the New York world in 1913. Brilliant invention. Just, you know, I need something in the paper, a grid, clues, amazing. I'll do that. That's cool. There we go. We have the crossword. So, you know, he invents this form, but it's really Margaret Farrer who's the first. She really takes over at the New York World and says, okay, this form doesn't need to have so many mistakes in it, and the clues can be, you know, we don't need to have that in this puzzle, and the clues can be, you know, some of Arthur Wynne's early clues were super almost too easy, like a bird for dove, which is almost too easy, and then he has like fiber of the Gomuti palm. What is that? We don't know. It's dough, but like nobody knows that. So Margaret Farrer is like, okay, we can make the clues sort of, we can make them playable, we can make them easier, harder, but we can really standardize them, and we can also standardize the symmetry of the puzzle. And I'm talking about American crosswords here, and I can get into, if we're interested, I can get into like the real difference between American crosswords and British cryptic style. That's kind of a different category, but like, Margaret Farrer really solidified, okay, grids need to be symmetrical, and the clues need to be clean, and the fill needs to be fill in a bowl, basically. Right. Like they're fun to solve. She instituted the Sunday breakfast test. Basically, you don't want to be solving the crossword, then whoopsie, have something kind of R-rated in there that like your grandma's gonna be really titillated to see, or that you don't want the 8-year-old to, like the precocious 8-year-old to solve. You know, all this has sort of evolved and changed over time, but I think that really codifying what it means to be a standardized form really helped the puzzle jump from a popular game into something that is, I would say, much more of a literary form now, because you know, as we all know, it's better, you need to have rules in order to break them too. So right, so the crossword needed to really like sort of shore up its formal rules in order for then people to bend and press and really create their own thing. It needed to be its thing.
Right. and I love the way that you sort of track the changes in puzzle construction and clue making over time as also taking a turn away from kind of in-group cultural keywords to wordplay, as well as kind of, fine-tuning the very particular kind of ambiguity that's involved in a lot of crossword clues. So I want to ask you a question about, all right, hold on, let me open this little document. There's a book that I want to ask you about. Maybe you've heard of it. I have a feeling you might have, called by Peter Turchi, called A Muse and a Maze.
I have heard of this, but yeah.
Okay, so there's a question I want to ask you that kind of uses a a set of terms that he works with that seems to really pertain here, which is he makes a distinction between puzzles and mysteries. So when he talks about, and he talks about this in the context of literature and writing stories and novels, mystery, like genre mysteries to him being kind of the puzzle book par excellence. Talking about the construction of story, the strategic management of information and that kind of thing, like what's going to happen next, when will we find out about this teased detail. So that's the puzzle. And then he talks about mystery in this context, referring to like unanswerable questions and to the part of writing and reading that one continues to think about or live with or feel because it's unsolvable or outside of like a rational explanation. Okay, that's the like conceptual framework. My question for you is, in writing this book, what were some of the really noteworthy puzzles for you that you encountered? And what were some of the really noteworthy mysteries as a writer and as someone who's constructing a book about puzzles?
That's, oh, I love that. And it really, I mean, I think that really gets to the heart of what is, both like what is puzzling about puzzles and I, a couple of things. I'm really glad you brought up mysteries because, crosswords and mysteries, they're so yoked. A clue, my favorite sort of etymological bit is that a clue, the word clue is from a ball of yarn, like a CLEW, is like a clue, a ball of yarn. So the idea would be a clue is like if you're in the labyrinth and Ariadne like throws her ball of yarn and you then like sort of trace out, and that's the idea of a clue is it's the thing that you're tracing in order to arrive at the answer too. So like and the development of the crossword puzzle, so I think really tracks from in the 19th century, the development of the detective novel. So the clue and the detective who comes in and the writer lays out the elements, and then we have the detective who comes in and solves the puzzle for us. And if it's a Sherlock Holmes story, we know kind of what the formula is going to be. It's a little bit like solving a crossword puzzle going into a Sherlock Holmes story. If you're the kind of reader who like wants to see if you can get it, like, as a reader, like, are there enough things in there that you can play Holmes and figure it all out and get to it? And usually Conan Doyle kind of like maybe withholds like just a tiny bit so that Holmes always gets to be the better puzzler than we are. But if you like, at what point do you have that like aha click moment of I've cracked this, I've solved this? And that's something that I think anyone who solves a crossword puzzle or who reads a detective novel, solves a detective, I think that's the thing that like is in that sort of first category of the crackable the crackable mystery thing, is that like aha eureka moment of, and that's what they're building towards. It's like it's the riddle logic of, okay, we need to, there is something mysterious and you're building a sort of mystery shell around it, and then there is going to be an answer and a reveal. And as a reader and as a solver of puzzles or detective novels or riddles or whatever, you go in knowing both things. You go in knowing you're going to be obfuscated, and you go in, but you trust that, like, yes, okay, there's going to be an answer there. I trust there's going to be an answer there. Versus, and actually, like, I'm thinking about in this, in just to go super wonky and on this, in Old English, so there's a difference between this like idea of a riddle, which is actually like related to the word to read. Like the word to read and the word to riddle were the same thing.
Oh,
And
wow.
then yeah, like so to riddle is to read and to read is to riddle. But there's a difference even in terms of genre between the riddle and the enigma. And the enigma is category 2 of the thing that's like the puzzle that is the deep puzzle that, you know, I don't know, I'll sit cross-legged for a second and just sort of pose the like deep the deep. It doesn't necessarily have to be that ponderous, like I don't have to be like, but I think the enigma is the thing that's like the kind of puzzle that it's not like I go in, I know there's going to be an answer there, I can crack the code, we're solve it, we're done. The enigma is like I can roil over this thing forever and ever and ever and ever and never find the answer to it. And I think there was definitely certain moments in writing the book that I was worried I was just so far down enigma, and it got into sort of enigma world of, wow, there's a lot of interesting stuff about crosswords. How do I fashion it into a book that's got at least some sort of arc to it, rather, like, yeah. So I think, like, in writing a book about type of riddle puzzle number 1, you inevitably find yourself in enigma world of, yeah, this is mysterious and great and cool, but there are also infinite solutions to it as well. So I think while Evan is still frozen, I will also just I'll remind him when he comes back. I will tell you guys that actually the very first crossword I tried to construct, or the second crossword I tried to construct, the first one was I talk about in the book, but I actually wrote a puzzle for Evan for a section of a journal that he was writing, running, editing editing through the Iowa Review. Yeah, Evan, I was just talking about that Phantasmagoria crossword that I did for that section of the, yeah.
This one? Yes, so,
yeah.
Yes, recently I was putting together this portfolio of sort of fantastical writing and art for the Iowa Review, inspired by this magazine from the 40s called View that introduced a lot of avant-garde ideas and aesthetics to American readers, which is interesting to me in retrospect because I don't know, the 20s, 30s, and 40s are such an important period in your book about puzzles and their kind of appearance on the scene.
Yeah.
But Adrian created a crossword puzzle with the theme Phantasmagoria, or Magic Lantern Show, both, one and the both. And I was so excited to publish it. What was it? Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what it's like to construct a puzzle. I mean, you go into this fairly in depth in the book, but what's your relationship like to constructing them now? I know you've put a lot of time into it and have been doing that for quite a while, really.
Yeah. So and and I think also just to say, like, the books, yeah, one thing that really excited me about crosswords, you were asking about their literary history earlier, as I realized that crosswords were an invention of modernism, and like crosswords were maybe like the secret either the secret sauce or the like another thing that happens in like in modernism, and that just made so much sense to me, the relationship between putting together fragments from lots of different places in order to create a both something that is both a cohesive whole and also just like a whole bunch of fragmentary stuff from our daily lives. I was like, wow, that is the crossword, and that is so much of what's going on in modernism, and that was so exciting to me. So yeah. So in constructing a crossword, though, the thing that I talk about this in the book, but the thing that really struck me was that 97% of what's hard about constructing a crossword is the grid. Getting that grid right that's the thing that is going to make or break your crossword. And you know, as a poet, as a writer, as someone who loves language, I was like, yeah, it's all about the clues, writing the super cool clues. Like, that's great. You know, I thought it was 50-50, but going in and realized, like, if the grid, the reason that it is the crucial thing when you're constructing is that, honestly, you can kind of write clues for any words basically. Like you can mess around with that, but if one letter goes off in a grid, that really just makes the whole rest of the grid completely either unravel, and you have to ravel it back up. So and that was something that I really had to learn, and I'm still very much learning. And so the crossword I wrote for you, Evan, actually, I let myself have a little bit more fun with it. It's a little bit like looser in terms of it wouldn't fly in the New York Times because it doesn't have the kind of bilateral symmetry that they require. I was playing with the theme of phantasmagoria, fantastic things, and like sort of I thought I was thinking a lot about the crossword as a form and playing with, what if I'd have like little things appear and disappear? Yeah, it is symmetrical, but there are certain things that within the puzzle itself, I think I repeat the same clue or the same answer like 5 times or 7 times, just because I wanted that sort of like ghostly presence around. So making that puzzle was so fun for me, because it was a moment to like where I was thinking about how can I kind of like stretch and play with this as maybe the most like extreme poetic form I'll ever approach.
Yeah, I love that. And as a kind of playful, almost collage-like medium to pursue these like modernist ideas. One of the other characters and individuals in your book that's so interesting is this. I'm going to forget who it is, but it's the person whose love of crosswords ultimately leads them to become a Joyce fanatic.
Yeah, Ruth Von Poole.
Right. And that's, yeah, again, I think just further evidence of there being there's some aspect or some evidence in all this of kind of very like almost overactive, inventive minds, and this, the use of mental energy we were talking about earlier is a big part of how it was talked about in the culture. And when you talk about or sort of profile different individuals, what really sticks out is them having this kind of really seriously intense mental energy, and how that like the question of what that gets funneled into becoming an important one. Yeah, I could go on and on, but maybe we should see if anyone has any questions in the audience.
Yeah.
I think I lost access to the Q&A field, Benjamin, in all my comings and goings from the Zoom room.
Apologies. Yeah, I'm happy. I have the questions. I'm happy to ask them if both of you want to jump in, or if Evan, you have any follow-ups, feel free to jump in. So I'm just going to start with, we have a bunch of questions that kind of ask for different things. So let's start with this question from an attendee who wants to know, could you talk a little bit about how the demographic of crossword enthusiasts has changed over time and how it's, I guess, evolved from being sort of like something very targeted to certain people?
Yeah, sure. I can talk about that. And I think maybe the best illustration of that is probably with the New York Times crossword, just because it's in the United States, it's certainly sort of the most widely played crossword, and it's there's lots and lots of fantastic crosswords out there, and there's more of them than ever, but that one is just has the biggest audience. And so the New York Times crossword, something that happened, a few things that happened to really change the demographic. First of all, in the sort of 60s and 70s, through various editors, the crossword really becomes this club of like, do you know the kind of words that get in the crossword a bunch, so like there's a bunch of crosswordies basically. And so crosswords and crosswords weren't allowed to have pop culture references in them, and they really like often weren't allowed to have references in them that weren't really tied to, frankly, white elite male culture. So when Will Shortz took over the Times Puzzle in 1993, it really was a watershed moment for the kinds of things that are allowed into the crossword. Like suddenly the word, I'm talking about this in the book, the canonical thing is like Oreo can be clued as a cookie instead of in the dictionary. Apparently it's a combining form for a mountain. Nobody knows that. We want Oreo in the puzzle, not because it's delicious, but I mean, that's like Oreos are delicious, but Oreos are delicious linguistically because they're like 4 letters. They have an O, 2 O's, an E, and R. We got like super common letters. They're great for puzzles. So this moment when the pop culture and just culture from everywhere can start entering into the puzzle means that more people feel welcome inside the puzzle, and we get more solvers, and that shifts the demographic. Frankly, the 2006 documentary Wordplay, that was a very successful movie it's a very sweet movie about the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament. I know from speaking to solvers and constructors, like I know that anecdotally, but like also I think you can chart this, like a lot of people who are sort of in their 20s and 30s got into the puzzle through watching that movie. Like they saw the movie and then they're like, I want to try my hand at that. And then it's a knock-on effect, because then you see people in their 20s and 30s, you see young people creating the puzzle, so there's greater diversity of references in the puzzle, so like more young people feel like interested in people from much more diverse backgrounds. So basically, like if you have more constructors from more diverse backgrounds, you get more interesting and exciting and variety of things in your crossword. And then you have more editors who are like from more diverse backgrounds, more test solvers. It's just like basically if you see more people doing it, then more people end up doing it. And in the United States at least, those are like some of the main ways that the crosswords creators and audience have continued to expand.
Great, thank you. So I'll get back to the question someone's asking about people who make crosswords, but I want to jump to this interesting one. That's an attendee wants to know, when meeting people who have turned crossword puzzles into a competitive activity, you talk about how people participate in crosswords for different reasons, and I'm curious about the various whys that surround the world of tournaments. And how, like, I guess an activity that sort of has this dailiness gets turned into a sport in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, because actually the crossword has been a tournament sport since its beginnings. Like
Oh, okay.
there were crossword tournaments in the 20s. And that's, we were talking about Ruth Von Poole early on, and or a little bit ago. And she's this she's a great figure in the world of crosswords. In the 1920s, she was the best crossword tournament solver out there. Like she's just there were tournaments at various hotels and ballrooms, both like I think there were like local and national tournaments. Ruth Von Poole was really great at them. In some of the earliest issues of the New Yorker, there's like a little profile of Ruth Von Poole, like saying like, wow, this like amazing crossword tournament solver. So crosswords did start out in this like parallel track of competitive sport and thing that you can just do on your commute, not competitively, and then somewhere in between, like like you compete against the person sitting next to you, your family member. Then and then the crossword tournament sort of track, I guess when crosswords weren't really that like 1920s fad anymore and they became this sort of stable thing in the newspaper, the tournament track ended up sort of dying down a little bit. But in 1978, Will Shortz, who had just been named editor of Games Magazine, he introduced the American Crossword Puzzle Tournament. And yeah, so he like sort of, and also Will Shortz is someone who's been studying puzzles his entire life. He got a degree in the word enigmatology from Indiana University. So like he wrote his like undergrad thesis on the history of American puzzles. He knows a lot about crosswords. I think he found out about these old tournaments, brought them back in the 70s, 80s. And so yeah, it really is like a strand of the crossword that has always been important to it. And I think the final thing I'll say on it, I know Evan will come back, I'm sure. But the final thing I'll say on it in terms of the competitiveness is what's been another evolution in the journey of the crossword as tournament is when you do it on your phone, the time comes up of how long it takes you to do it and how precisely you're doing it too. You can't just like fill in the squares and say, great, I'm done, I filled in the squares, la-di-da. You have to be correct. And also it'll tell you exactly how fast you've done in it. And the apps on your phone, I think all the crossword apps do this. Like they chart how well you've done, they chart your statistics over time. So the digital nature of the crossword really continues to help emphasize that juicy competition element to it.
Yeah, even when you're just competing against yourself, as so many of us are doing in our weekly, daily crosswords.
Totally.
So I do want to move on to this question about someone curious about your experience of talking to people who make crossword puzzles. And I kind of wanted to just expand it a little bit because we've thrown around the name Will Shortz a bit, who I think in a lot of ways has become sort of like synonymous with sort of the American crossword fad puzzle. So many of us just know that name sort of intrinsically. And I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about like what kind of personalities you encounter among people whose career is making puzzles. I mean, enigmatology is such a specific thing and such a specific person who studies it. And I love to hear what those kinds of people are like,
I do think Will Shortz is the one and only enigmatology major ever.
Probably, yeah.
And what many people, including myself, I didn't realize this until I started the research, but like a lot of people think that Will Shortz writes every crossword puzzle for the New York Times. False. Will Shortz writes 0 crossword puzzles for the New York Times. In fact, Will Shortz edits them. And what editing a crossword really means is when freelance constructors, so constructors just send in their puzzles to the New York Times from wherever they are, they just send them in. And so Will and a couple of assistants now go through and look for puzzles where the grid really works well, and it's, you know, a fascinating, lively grid and has either an interesting theme answer or really cool words in there. And then to edit the puzzle, they often will change somewhere from like 20 to 90% of the clues. But that's, you know, and it's that I just say that the people who construct crosswords, what's great about them is that it's similarly to people who are really avid solvers of, they come from all walks of life, they come from everywhere, like you know, I think that to construct a, to be a very to become a really expert crossword constructor, that you see tendencies, like they have a lot of math music types who sort of have that kind of right brain left brain crossover, both among solvers and constructors. It's really important to have the left brain ability to dig into the grid and the symmetry and that nature of it, and then you need the right brain, how am I going to make all these associations and connections happen. But yeah, I mean, I think the kind of people who make crosswords are so super smart and really it's that left brain right brain thing of finding cool sparks and associations and different kinds of associations between things. I mean, like just the different ways of associating among words, but then have the organizational computational capacity to really like play around with letter combinations as well and do both of those things simultaneously. It's like if you're really good at both sections of the SAT, the math and verbal section, you will probably be great at crossword construction.
Yeah. Great. So I think we have time for 2 more questions. I'm going to just jump to this one, which is just, did anything surprise you while you were researching or writing this book?
Yeah. So many surprises. Yeah, I think that one thing that surprised me in the nicest way, so I want to focus on this, is I mean, it wasn't a surprise, but it was a delight, was how generous the crossword community is, and how you know, really just kind, the people who, and by crossword community I mean both the millions of people who are solving daily, weekly, and the super solvers who are solving, you know, as I was interviewing, they're like solving a crossword puzzle, you know, and the super constructors who are making crosswords, and the editors who are putting together these things for publications. Really, and if you go, and crossword Twitter is a really lovely place. It's a, like, I find Twitter extremely inscrutable and unfathomable and like scary, but crossword Twitter is really nice. It's people who are, you know, cheering each other on for solving a hard thing or creating a cool puzzle and finding great word associations. But it's also just like people sort of cheering each other in general, and but also kind of people like making little diabolical weird word jokes, and like crossword Twitter had I mean, all of Twitter had a lot of fun with the Suez Canal, but crossword Twitter really had the most sort of I don't know, spirit of generosity fun of, oh well, like this thing is a literal puzzle happening. Let's have a cool time with that. So I think that was, so not a surprise, but just a genuine delight of how welcoming the crossword community is. I highly recommend hanging out with these people.
And apparently checking out crossword Twitter, which sounds way better than all the rest of Twitter. So
I basically like exclusively follow my friends the crossword Twitter. It's a much better place.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask one last question, which is just, can you think of a crossword clue that really stumped you? Is there like a famous example that you can sort of conjure of a time when you just couldn't solve it?
Yes, and that's so many things, but this is and I will promise I will do this very quickly, but this is a great time to think about the difference between British crosswords and American crosswords. So like the British crossword, the cryptic crosswords are the clues that are the super stumpers. So like cryptic crosswords, all of the clues have two levels. They have a wordplay level and they have like a literal level. But often the wordplay level is like 15,000 different kinds of wordplay in order to figure out what wordplay you're in. So there's a book that takes this as its title, but a cryptic clue is like pretty girl in crimson rose. Pretty girl in crimson rose. So the answer, I'm just gonna give it. The answer is rebelled. So pretty girl is a bell, a B-E-L-L-E. In crimson, so R-E-D, red, so rebel, and rose as in rose up, as in arose, as in rebelled against things. So a pretty girl who's a belle who's in crimson, the R-E on the one end, the D on the other end, and rose, rebelled, rose up.
A bit of a deep cut.
It is a super deep cut, and there
Yeah.
are harder ones than that.
Wow. I think Enigma is the perfect place to end tonight. I'm glad you shared that with us so we can all get kind of an idea of what we will reckon with when we make the jump to cryptic crosswords. But again, just thank you so much for joining us tonight. This conversation has been a total delight. Thanks to all of you out there for spending part of your evening with us. Please learn more about this incredible book and purchase Thinking Inside the Box on harvard.com. I've put the link to purchase in the chat, and Adrian's holding it right now. On behalf of Harvard Bookstore here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, enjoy the rest of your week. Keep reading and stay safe, everyone. And again, thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you so
everyone.
much. Thank you. Bye.